So, hello everybody. Welcome to our Fida Talks. We haven't had one of these. We've had smaller ones, but this is a bigger one with a bigger sort of collective. It should be a fun experience. We're lucky to have all of these great people tonight. These were all finalists who made it through to the end part of the awards, which is always a kind of a good and a bad experience. Lucky we don't do the BAFTAs and show everybody and then there's crying and fighting or whatever happens. It's great to participate. I always think, would I participate in the awards? Probably not, because my ego would be destroyed. So I'm grateful that everybody gets involved and has fun and it is part of the process. So I'm just going to share my screen with everybody to see our lovely presentation. So let me just present here. So tonight we've got Kelly Bailey, Luke Bullen, Sophies Kiosk, Caroline Riches, and Sophie, you can say if what the right name is in a little while. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
If we're happy with this, your name's like that on there, so we'll stick with that. We did have a funny one with Nuno da Costa, which was Jesus. So Jesus kept coming up on the screen and I was like, who's Jesus? And it was Nuno da Costa. His partner's called Jesus, or Jesus. So I'm just, the topic tonight is about tactile image making, and these four beautiful people, I've got to know probably over the last 6 months or probably longer. I've seen their work creep into our field in the Fida world, and either I've spotted them or they've become members, or I've just seen their work come up and I thought it was interesting, and they had a really interesting approach to the way that they make stuff or the way that they work, and and then there'll be a dialogue. So it's great to have these people involved and sort of following on with our journey and carrying on, I guess. And here's some pieces of theirs. These aren't all the works that they submitted, but these are some of the pieces that I thought were really interesting to me. It may not be their favorite pieces, but they resonated to me, and I thought, I like this. This really works. This is interesting to me. So there are four images I've grabbed. Some little pointers I've got here is this idea of knowledge. So all of the people who are in this discussion today have a sort of academic background. They've gone to university, they've studied. So we've had people that are self-taught, but we're in a different field today. So we've got a few sort of research people that have a practice and a sort of academic rigor. And all of them, from what I see with their work, whether it's knitting or embroidery or sticking or cutting, is very playful. And in that approach, I see there's some sort of form of progress. And all of them, if I look back through looking at their Instagram feeds over the last few months, there's a real progress with all of them. And that's from my personal experience, not for me to judge. It's just me, how I feel. And everyone has their own opinion. I've had artists whose work I've shared and people say, this is rubbish, or it's garbage, or why do you show this work? It looks like a kid's done it. It's everybody's opinion. So, and I have to listen to a lot of it or discard it. So it's personal opinion. It's art at the end of the day. So with regards to what we're doing and image making, is we're looking at this sort of what's happening in the world today, and our knowledge of image making is this negative play and understanding the use of space, its role in art and contemporary fashion illustration, image making. And we have some of Sophie's work, and Sophie is a printmaker, an image maker, lecturer. I had some really nice pictures of her like teaching and showing on the whiteboard. I would have been lucky to have that sort of experience at college. Usually I was just shouted at and it was wrong. So I guess that's quite an interesting experience. But what I'd like to ask, I guess, from Sophie is, your approach to image making and where you start. Like, is it for a sketchbook, or how do you find the images that you work from? What are your references? Give us a little insight into your world.
How it rolls. Well, firstly, hi Patrick, hi everyone. And just before we talk about everyone's work, which I'm really excited about, I just want to say I wish this was like a drinks party. There's some great people here, and just thanks Patrick for pulling us all together, and or for Fida generally. It's been great for me. So yeah, my approach to my work. Where do I start? I'm really analog, as Patrick you've kind of picked up on, and I a lot of my inspiration comes from kind of magazine tears originally, like initially, or I'll have a look on Vogue Runway and I'll be going through the shows and something will jump out at me, and then I'll take that one look and go and explore into that designer a bit more and what their collection's doing. And I think I'm really, really lucky that I've been blessed with this residency at a printmaking workshop in South London. And so my brain I was a printmaker originally. I did a fine art printmaking degree in Brighton many years ago. And my brain just works in kind of layers and screens. And so I quite like dissecting, kind of hand drawing out a photograph, just drawing from the photograph, and then taking that down into layers, reimagining the picture, sort of thinking about what marks can I bring to this image to tell my interpretation of what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. Yep. And so then it starts to become a bit of a visual conversation between me and the picture. And I find now, as my work's kind of speeding up a bit, and I'm growing in confidence on the back of the competition, really. I mean, that's been so great for me. That dialogue between me, the work starts to tell you more the more you work, if that doesn't sound too pretentious. Yeah.
No, it's good. And I guess, you know, when I went to university and I did a lot of printmaking, I went to Kingston to do my degree, and I lived in the printmaking room, and really learning about burnishing and processes, and then incorporating that into the way that I work, and learn from it, and I guess play with it even more and see, could it be a monoprint? So when I look at your work and I see all the different ways of how you could almost remake the same image as a printmaker or as an image maker, you know, it's so interesting to see what spaces you're going to paint in, how you work around things and build up. Even if it's an image that's just black and white, there's a real sort of a conversation happening between this mark and the mistakes that can destroy the artworks as well.
Or make it. I mean, that's what about printmaking is the happy accidents are, you know, that sometimes they're a real gift. And I quite like the process, because it stops me from quite often chucking too much on, because you just have to, by virtue of having to stop to make another screen or mix another color, kind of slows me down a bit. But sometimes it also presents new ideas, like as you go, you see something and you're like, oh wow, actually now that I see that printed in front of me, maybe I could chuck red over one side and not the other, or, you know, and that the process itself kind of presents new possibilities all the time. So it's kind of quite on the go, it's quite live, but the process restrains me a bit, because I find when I'm just drawing and painting, which I love, sometimes I can quickly kind of kill an image, because I just want to throw everything at it because I'm kind of excited, and it goes a bit wrong. So yeah, that's why
I guess in printmaking is, you know, working on a stone as a lithograph, or working in etching with sugar lifting and stuff like that. That's where you could really get. And I remember when I used to have printmaking screens, and I'd use a rag, and you get bits of the texture of the rag in the actual print.
Yeah.
Really be like, and that was just from cleaning the screen. I was like, an image can come from cleaning the screen. So just that sort of, and then how do you bring that into your own work as well, which is, I guess that's the journey that you kind of go through with regards to printmaking. I think the fascination of printmaking is a brilliant way of re-extending maybe the image. Like you make it, you paint it, you put it on a screen, and then you go, it could be in one color, you did misregistration, what bits could block out, I guess all them things.
Yeah, yes, just yesterday I was in the workshop and I was trying to print something, and you have to have patience to be a printmaker, I think. You know, there's lots of little elements that can kind of go your way or not. And we used to have a big old grandpa of an exposure unit that was like a kind of tank, but I'd worked out the sweet spot of how long I had to expose all the screens for to get exactly what I wanted. And then he died. And we've now got this new kind of start of an exposure unit that is really quick and the bulbs are really strong, and it's thrown off all of my sort of equations. And so yesterday, initially what I was printing wasn't really going how I wanted, but I didn't want to waste it. So I just thought, okay, I'll just try a bit of misregistration in a different color, and it might kind of bring out this vibe of what I saw in the image in the first place. And suddenly there's something kind of really exciting there, and that was out of something going a bit wonky in the first instance, and that's nice when you can do that.
Yeah, and I guess once you learn that, then you can bring in all of that knowledge to your, if you were going to do anything digital, you would go, well, I did a bit of misregistration, I could do that and bring that process really. That's why I moved into a digital space, because I remembered the mistakes or the processes, and then I could bring it into Photoshop, and then you do it in 5 seconds and then the whole process is done. Even though the happiness of this lovely smelling piece of art, most of my jobs came because my work smelt so much of printmaking.
Had so much authenticity. They
Yes.
believed you were really artistic because it smelled nice. Yeah.
People love that. So I guess from that point of view, the printmaking side of things is amazing. So I'm just going to move through, and then we'll
yeah. Great. Thank you.
The next person, and she'll probably wonder why I've selected these two, is Kelly Bailey's kind of come onto the scene for me in, I guess, the last 6 months. And I don't know if I've hounded her or kind of followed her and enjoyed what she's done and images that she's kind of pushing and pulling, that sort of process. And this experimenting. And we were talking about two things. So one is art enabling you to stay positive as a person. So image making from that point of view as your well-being, because we're working with the Be Well Collective, and also this enabling to have freedom. And I picked these two things out because if anyone who doesn't follow Kelly, you'll see a combination of loads of image making and drawing, and then there's a moment of I'm going back to basics, cutting up, and then there's a switch again to a hyper realistic sort of drawing, and that this sort of like flittering around of techniques and styles and environments is fascinating to watch from an Instagram point of view, because obviously we're not all next to each other or we're not always in conversation, but it's interesting. So what I'd like to do is firstly introduce Kelly and almost dissect your brain to what the hell's going on here and what is going on in Instagram world with Kelly Bailey.
Well, it's funny that you pulled these up, because I think the sort of clash between what you were describing of these particular images, that sort of moment of play, sort of stripping it back, and then the probably more considered stuff, the sort of digital and compose stuff is probably two people having a bit of a fight. My textile person, which is this stuff, the kind of experimental, playful stuff, and and this is kind of how I teach. This is how we incorporate different ways of drawing. So drawing through collage and cutouts and basically playing with materials. And this particular work, it's funny that you related it to staying positive, because this was a spin-off of some earlier stuff that I did a couple of years ago, which was basically about play, and that not everything has to have a reason, and it was just the mere joy of playing and placing shapes and enjoying color for the sake of enjoying the process of it. And those led into a set of embroideries to, again, learn a new process. I'm very much, I love technology and I love hand processes. So I do tend to mix the two. I've always done that, actually. I've never been a true printer. I've always had that element of sort of mixed media, playful elements, way back for when I was studying in my degree. I was doing printed textiles for fashion. So it was basically flat print, and not many people were sort of inventing with surface, but I always like to invent with surface to see what else the process can do. Typically you would print onto this particular fabric, but not something else. But, what if you did print on the fabric that you're not supposed to print on? And then mixing the processes around. So I've always sort of continued to do that. I've kind of had that sort of inquisitive mind to sort of think sort of sideways. So that's why these sort of images sort of come in every so often, because I'm always trying to think of ways to bring it into my sort of illustrative work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So so that's why there are sort of moments of, but I really like to work this way, and I don't always know how to find that sort of common ground. Excuse me.
And we were talking this week with some of the other illustrators about courage, and it takes a lot of courage to put an image up like this and say that's it and that's all you're going to get, and then we have a nervous breakdown that we get 5 likes and no one responds and there's no comments, and then everyone's like, right, I have to go back to where I was, and we're working on this Richter scale of likability factor, as if we're on the X factor, and we want likes. and for me, some of you might follow me on Instagram, but I'm quite anti the system. Is I'll put crap up there and some good bits, or photograph something in my garden, and I try not to be haunted by likes. And I think a lot of people speak to me, and even people have said, oh, I liked your work today, and I'm like, well, I don't care, it's irrelevant. And mine's a visual diary of what I do, and I think it is a moment of maybe age and not caring anymore, and kind of saying, well, I'm just going to do what I want. And that's why when I see this stuff, I find it quite refreshing, and I feel like Kelly's having a moment and it's quite nice to see. And I'm like, that takes sort of courage, and then how you integrate it into commercial work, that's the next part. And you just don't know. And with regards to textiles and textures, all of this stuff will become useful. Like when I did some scarves for Dior, and we were talking about the frame that went around the edge of the border of the actual scarves, I was doing that exactly with that paintbrush stroke, and just painting lines and squares and shapes. About 50 squares I painted just to do the border and get the right amount of, so it felt like an analog paintbrush that I was making, that even though the scarf was going to be printed digitally. So all of these things will come back, and I think there will be a use. within textiles or within part of a face. And we spoke about like, you know, the virtual exhibition, how arty to go, and building up audiences that can take it. I think within the fashion illustration world, there is this sort of fear that it has to be perfect and look beautiful, and I'm sort of against that. So I'd probably lose a lot of fans, but I don't really care. I'm trying to set a vision of where I'm going, and I do mix things up. I have super high realistic painters and drawers as well, so I am unpredictable, so it's quite nice. So that hopefully you might see that wackiness. My kids might have been played out, and I go, right, super high realism drawing today is going to be posted. So well, I guess also,
sorry, could you say that again?
Oh, Siri's talking to me now. I guess color. So your color palette, like you've got some ultramarines in there. Like some people say they do a lot of trend research for colors that are going to come. And you being in fashion, do you do that, or do you go with mood? Like Joanna Layla, who I speak to, is always, I feel like the greens at the moment. So she's very driven by her feelings to color. Like, or do you just go for it?
I think at the moment it's instinctive. I think when I'm working commercially, I have no choice but to work to trends, because I'll be working for a brand that also would need to follow those. But lately, yeah, completely intuitive. I mean, this stuff was when we were doing the ultramarine exhibition stuff. So that some of those were sort of offcuts of things that I was playing with and sort of painting out grounds. But I always love the beauty in the offcuts. So I like to have those. But yeah, in terms of color, yeah, completely intuitive. I don't feel the need to follow trends any longer, because you know everybody else is doing that.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I need to.
Yeah. No, good. Okay, we'll shift along. So next one. So tonal form. So Luke has sort of come on my radar. And Luke, I was going to show some of Luke's knitted work, and he has some beautiful photography of sort of, there was a flowing piece of fashion, and which was on my desktop. But if you haven't seen Luke's work, go and have a look, because Luke's got a real mix of what he does. And I guess what I really loved about these images, and the images that you submitted felt really painterly. And I really dug back and looked at your earlier works and how much richer the new work has come. And I love the sort of fragility of the paper feels like snow. And you know, you feel immersed in what you're doing. And you know, we were talking about negative space and how you've painted how you've drawn the white around the head and just filled in the little details. So Luke, what I would like you to explain is your sort of mix from fashion designer to illustrator to whatever else you do, and what informs what.
Okay. Hello everyone, first of all. I've got a bit of it's all really weirdly interconnected. Like, I started off as a child always drawing and painting a lot, and then later on I went to uni, and by sheer fluke I ended up doing fashion design. I was originally going to do fine art, but really didn't see myself within the fine art world. I did my foundation at St. Martin's, and at the time it was very much the more abstract the better, the more provocative the better, and that was the trend in the art world, and still is to a certain degree. And I just didn't see myself in there, because I'm very academic, I'm very tactile, and very analog as well. And I love crafting, creating things with my hands, and just always trying to push and perfect that skill further and see how I can push it. And therefore I didn't really find myself too much in the art world. I accompanied a friend who was applying for fashion design like crazy. It was her one mission in life to get into St. Martin's or London College of Fashion, and I just tagged along, and my drawings and illustrations just got me onto the fashion course, and I ended up doing that because I just thought it's something I don't know anything about, and I ended up hating it. I did fashion design and technology, where you just kind of you're turned into research machines where you just have to churn out design after design after design. And I always use my art or my work as escapism. It's always something that I find joy in. So when I was on the fashion design course, I started knitting because I just enjoyed doing that. And I just knitted the entire time, and I became a bit of a freelance knitter after my degree. But then now I work in fashion. I've kind of gone back to drawing and back to painting again, because I always like to do the opposite of what I have to do for work, basically, just to escape or find some sort of balance. And it's funny you chose well, that beige illustration in particular, because that's, in my personal opinion, from my own taste, one of my worst illustrations I've ever put up on my page, on my Instagram. But I do like to use just anything that I can find around me, and quite embarrassed to say I'm a bit of a material hoarder. I recycle and keep any type of materials, offcuts from fabrics or paper. And I believe that paper that that illustration is drawn on is probably from primary school. Like, I may have got a bunch of a pack of paper that I still use from back in primary school days. I'll dig stuff up, and that will pretty much very often inspire what I create. So that really nice beige or almost skin tone was very interesting to me. I was working for The Row at the time, and they're very tonal. They do really beautiful earth tone type fashions. And I don't know, and I just started, and actually that illustration, I don't like it that much because it's not a technique I usually use. I don't usually use pencils, but I think looking at your Instagram and being surrounded by seeing what everyone else was doing, it's a very much that typical illustration trope of, you know, carving out the light on paper with pastels or with pencil. I just felt motivated to do it. My work is always, it's my downfall as an illustrator, but at the same time, it's just what I like to do. I don't have a particular medium and style. I don't do everything in one style, and that's my signature technique and my signature paper or style. I like to kind of just go with the flow of whatever interests me for whatever project. So the one next to it is actually an illustration of one of my knit pieces. And that is on a plastic sleeve. So I found this really beautiful teal colored plastic, which I don't know where I found that or why I kept it because of the color. And I like to very often illustrate and draw and paint on crap materials, just because I don't become too precious about it, because I'm such a perfectionist and precious about, you know, how academically realistic or right does it look when I'm drawing or painting. So I like to kind of mix that up a bit, or put a hurdle in my own way by doing an illustration on a really nasty piece of plastic sleeve that I just cut up into an A4 piece. And because then it pushes me to not be so precious about it, because I feel like you were talking about earlier with negative space, I'm also very guilty of just overworking and overdoing everything, because that's what I love to do. I love to just keep crafting and working on something to death. So very often I like to use plastic foils or old paper that I've kept with me for many, many years, and they're not, you know, the most gorgeous Italian brand paper that costs, you know, £100 per sheet. I could never illustrate on that kind of paper, because it just then feels this has to be a masterpiece to justify going on this piece of paper. And that stress is then just not fun to me at all. So yeah, I just like mixing different mediums and just trying different things with each illustration a little bit, just so I learn something a little bit new maybe each time. So I just see, oh, how did the acrylic respond to this plastic? How did it respond on paper? We know and very well. So I always like to kind of just, yeah, doodle and paint on maybe unconventional materials. I'm not trying to be avant-garde or anything, but just because it frees me up a bit more to just be a bit more experimental, I guess.
I,
Um,
I guess, and we, for those who didn't hear, before we all spoke, we were talking about David Downton hating some of the illustrations and I did exactly the
and
same
you did
to you.
exactly the same to me. I was thinking when I saw this slide, I was like, oh God, no, not that one. But
I think that's quite, I think sometimes, yes, it's nice that you're being critical and it's like seeing a bad photograph and you go, oh no, please. But and this is another problem commercially, is if you have work out there, and I've had this, where I got a job for Selfridges and it was the work I did when I was a student, and this was 10 years after I graduated, and I was like, but I don't do that work anymore. And they were like, but that's the work we love. And I was like, so it just shows sometimes you could be haunted by old work and people might go, and I guess we were looking at tone, and I really could see this understanding of the blending of tone. And I guess it was quite nice to see an old piece with something that's new, that you kind of have moved into an area, and this use of different materials. I did a piece on sugar paper when I was at the RCA, and the tutor just ripped it up. They said, the paper's so crap, it's an insult for us to look at it. And they ripped it up in my face. So you would have got murdered. And I just never understood. I was like, what does the paper matter? Like, it's irrelevant. And I quite liked the paper, how it functioned. They were like, this is cheap crap. Why are you drawing on kids' paper? You should be drawing on real paper. This is supposed to
would have lapped it up.
I didn't get it. So it's quite refreshing to hear you're like me, go in the bin, get stuff out of the bin. Things get thrown in the bin and I take it back out of the bin and then use it. So, you do become a hoarder of material. I've got materials and fabrics, and we had Prada selling some old fabrics because they have run-ons. And I was buying it. I was like, this is great. The kids are good. And I still got it. And the kids are now cutting and making patchwork things. Beautiful Prada Italian textiles. But this sort of keeping, and I like the sort of thought process of the response of when you put the paint on the material, how it acts. And then maybe you'll say, I could use that knowledge again somewhere else. And I think that's what you're doing, is you're building up your knowledge through making. And I think that you're building up this encyclopedia of information as you make, and it's not always like this. You could say that's a work in progress to the next piece, work in progress, and you just develop a sort of language or a body of work, and you're never happy. So you're never going to be happy. Whatever I put up, the next piece would never be good enough. And you say, well, I have to be happy with this one because we submitted this, but I'm pretty sure there's another one there that you'd have went, that's the better one, and it moves on, and you might come back. It could be a phase. I'm not too sure. So, and with regards to the fashion, because the knitting side of it, and you incorporating it into the drawing, because I can see some of the knitting stuff. Have you tried to do any visual image? Because on some of the pieces of your embroidery, there is images, and I'm wondering, have you thought about making quilts or being more like Tracy Emin or working in that way?
Funnily enough, that was an idea that I had planned before all of the pandemic hit, and put that on the shelf for the time being. Yeah, I am looking at ways maybe in the future of just merging the two even more together, having that illustrative style or look within more of the textile world as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'd be fascinated to see and also putting multiple different materials within the textile rather than what is practical. So Tracy might work with certain things, but you might have bits of foils in there and bits of plastics. You know, that would be more fascinating to see, and then drawing on it or working on it or knitting on it, and it just becomes sort of a 3D tapestry. I think, because tapestries, I think, I don't want to say coming into fashion, but there's been lots of people doing these sort of 3D tapestries, and it would be nice to see more creatives like illustrators and image makers making more 3D artwork in a more textiles way. I'd be love to see how you would approach that and what direction. I don't know. It's a journey, and watch this space and see the journey. Okay, so we're going to move along to. Let me just move this over here so we can see. So to Caroline. And Caroline, you'll see her work. You probably see me posting some of her work, and I find her work almost direct, to the point, and almost missing bits. And I think I might have referenced Giacometti at one point, but it has that sort of stripped down Giacometti feeling to it. And I guess her work, it feels spontaneous, and I like that sort of directness of illustration. And it feels quite hard because there is other illustrators who have similar bits, but I don't think the maturity is there. And so it's really tough when you're looking at different people's work, how to select what to work with and what images you make. So I'd be interested to know from you, because there's sort of a layering approach, but there's also a direct flatness to it as well.
Yeah.
Almost like Matisse worked quite flat. So Caroline, give us a sort of an overview into your world, and then how you get to here.
Yeah. So when I've thought about my mark making a little bit more, it actually goes way back to my foundation. I work in fashion design. I teach fashion design and have done for many years. So really, I suppose I learned how to draw in quite an academic, structured way on my foundation by two tutors had actually been to the Slade. And there was a certain technique, I don't know if you can sort of see a bit of sort of marking the figure out and leaving those marks on the page. I'm sort of doing it with my hand now, and I can't get rid of it. And our tutors always used to make us stand to do the work, even though you were on, you know, at the end of the day, you really wanted to sit down, and it was like, no, get up. It was quite a tough day with charcoal all day life drawing, but these marks just purely come from that. And then I suppose when you leave your foundation, and I decided to do fashion design, and I don't remember doing any life drawing on my fashion course, but I remember still drawing like this when many people were maybe a little bit more, well, it was the early 90s when I did my degree, so it was a certain style of illustration, and everyone used to say, oh, yours is quite messy, we like it, but it's not slick enough. But, you know, I sort of kept at it. But I think the art side of it, I mean, my mum is an artist, so she's a painter, and I've grown up with it. So I think some of it's gone. I've watched layering of paint, and I've seen it, and there's bits that she's taught me. But I think what I try and get in my work is a real energy, and I love fashion, always have, and I've always loved to draw. So, and the ultimate of that coming together is drawing fashion shows. So that's what I love to do. I'd love to do it live. I haven't done much of that. You know, I've worked loads of fashion shows, but I've always been backstage with a bin bag, picking up the rubbish or doing the donkey work. So it's like, I just work from photographs, and it's almost like how I see a show. I've thought about it, this Burberry thing, you half shut your eyes and that's the audience, so that's the show. You know, I want to try and represent that quite quickly. as well. I think mine are killed. My drawings are in the bin when I've spent too long on them. I wasn't keen on that Burberry one actually, but you've picked one that I wasn't keen on. But what I did do in there, which you might like, you know, you're talking about having fun. All my friends are the audience, so like my workmates, like there's Emma and Nicola, and you know, they know who they are. But then I was like, you're in the audience. So it's about fun, it's fashion, you know, it's what it is. So, but I suppose I come from a very technical, this is how we're going to draw today and you're going to follow me, and then I've sort of taken it my own way. And I think my two tutors, they used to sort of talk about Auerbach all the time, and we were taught to draw like him, or what's his name, Uanuglo, so it's all the measuring, and paint like Cézanne in blocks. So I still, when I paint, it's in sort of blocks, and that's it. And it's because I did a bit of illustration at the RCA with Julie Verhoeven. Yeah, so she's a really inspiring illustrator. So that was my favourite lessons, just being in the life room, doing all that again. And I teach from life when I can. We've had that stopped because of COVID, so again it's projected on the screen, and I'm just like this woman who's, people might not want to listen to me talk about, we need to keep drawing because everybody's got their iPads and what have you, but it's something I do for pleasure, and something I've always done, but it's only now that I've got this time. Now my kids are getting a bit older, one can sort of go out with his mates, that I've just got this Saturday afternoon or whatever just to do something for myself. And it's just a joy to do it, and it's there. I mean, when I was designing, my design development was kind of like this, really. It's not that much of a departure, or you know, my portfolio was all this sort of similar mark making, but I think I feel like I've got back into it maybe over the last 6 months, but I've not done it for a long time other than teach it. So it's just for pleasure, and I never thought anybody would want it on the walls, but seems to be selling. So I just thought, who'd want that on the walls? But then, you know, it's working, I suppose.
I think it's great to have. This is why it's good to have multiple voices on here, because I have spoken to some people and they do take it a little bit too serious. They need to chill out a little bit, and you are going to have a period where you feel like you look like someone else, or your work is just not going the way it wants to go, or you just need to take a break from it and rethink and remodel it, and find your own vision. It isn't they talk about styles, and people, like I have had a few people contact me and say, oh, this person has ripped off my style, or there's this, and people get really angry about the whole emulation of style. So I do hear a lot of stuff, and it's quite interesting for your approach, just to say, well, screw it, I'm just going to have fun, incorporate a lot of my experiences. And Julia Verhoeven is a perfect example of screw it, do what you want, and let the magic happen. And she managed to like mix it all in, and she gets everything. She gets away with so much within her work. So I don't know if everybody knows her work, but it's, she's a fascinating, and she's even gone more over the top now. So I don't know if you've seen her more fine art work, and she's doing a bit more fashion, but I think she's still at the RCA. I think she's
I mean, it was a long time, I left there a long time ago, but I just remember her lessons, and I suppose it's great when you have these good art teachers, isn't it, that you take from them and pass that on to students, or try your best to anyway, but I do teach a lot of drawing, but in fashion design degrees, it's maybe right at the beginning, and then there's so much to fit in, you know, in terms of your pattern cutting and your range building and all the rest of it. There's not as much time as I'd like to do it, so it is fitting it in. And to be fair, some people are interested and some people are not. So
the other thing is that's popped up, and I've been speaking to a few companies in America with regards to how to get to make fashion illustrators, because a lot of illustrators are contacting me, and this is probably for all of you, is a lot of the illustrators are being contacted to either do work on something that's not fashion illustration. I saw someone post up, oh, here's another one of my hats, and they were drawing something else. But with regards to, like, there's a lady who is working, she was the head of Ralph Lauren, and she was saying to me that, why aren't the illustrators drawing more for the fashion design, like learning how to draw fashion collections? So how to do technicals, doing flats, because when I worked in film as well, they said there is no fashion illustrators alive, and I said there is. This is why I started it, because I worked on James Bond, and I was given 3 or 4 different people, and they said, right, you have to illustrate. I had Daniel Craig, and I can't remember his name now, but I'd have a few baddies, and they'd say, right, you need to illustrate all of his garments, all what he's going to wear. But because I'd worked in fashion, I understood about the garment, and they said, right, you need to know about Armani 80s drop shoulders, so you need that sort of fashion context. And it's an area that a lot of, which I'm going to probably push next year a little bit more, is getting the illustrators to think more as a fashion figure. And there's people crying out for people in fashion film and in costume that are illustrators, because they tend to, and whether it's drawn digitally or by hand, they don't. I turned up and I had ink and pens, and they were like, "Where's your iPad?" And I said, "I don't have one. My kids are playing on it." And I was just drawing, and they were like, "Oh my God!" And you know, I draw hundreds in a day. And even when I worked with Justin Timberlake, all hand drawn. I drew all his collection. And there's work there. So I'm trying to work out why more illustrators aren't just documentary illustrators looking and creating sort of decorative pieces. There is employability out there, and there is an illustrator who you will find out soon, who was one of the judges. I'm forgetting his name now, but he's just become head of Gucci for women's wear.
All right.
Let me try and remember his name. He was one of the judges, and I've forgotten. But I interviewed him with Spiros, and I'm trying to...
Is it Peter Turner?
Peter Turner. He's just...
I do know the name,
I love him.
So great. He's so great.
His illustrations are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he's just taken out. He was saying, well, I can't do this now, and I'm going to Gucci. Hopefully I'm not going to get him ringing me up saying, you're not meant to share that information. But I'm pretty sure it will be out, because he's been doing his contract for ages. But he was at Tom Ford as well with me.
Yeah.
And he was, and he's just an illustrator, but he also designer. So probably similar to Luke. And Luke, I'd be really interested to know from you, is that something that you've ever been brought into or thought about?
Or more commercial projects with illustration, fashion illustration in particular, do you mean?
So you're brought in like Antonio Lopez, and you're there to illustrate and capture the vibe of the collection. Richard Haynes does it. Bill Donovan does it. And I think because now you've got this beautiful style of drawing, is bringing it into a more figurative full figure, and then it helps develop the collection for a fashion designer. Or you just don't want to work with fashion designers and you've had enough of that.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. I just feel maybe my perspective isn't the right one. I guess it's different for everyone, but I just felt like how you mentioned it before, it's become a bit of a little bit forgotten. Like, I feel like the industry has for a long time forgotten that illustrators exist, or that they can enrich a collection or the design process, or whatever aspect of the thing that's been planned in the back, or even as advertisement or anything in the front. I think with the whole digitization, I think it's gone direction graphic designers, so they've become the new illustrators, so to speak, within the industry. So they are in charge of, you know, narrating what the mood is, what the website looks like, and imagery, and I do feel like illustrators have maybe become a little bit forgotten, but maybe more so they're coming back again. There are some examples of people who have still had amazing careers, like yourself, you know, being brought onto projects to illustrate backstage, and where it is now more appreciated again to have that more analog maybe aspect to it, or people even drawing at shows. That used to be such a big thing, and I'd love to see that come back again in a big way, where you don't just have the Instagram stars in the front row, but also maybe, you know, some illustrators are actually capturing the mood and the spirits of what's happening, of the spectacle. Hopefully it comes back. I would be interested to do more projects like that for sure, and I'm sure everyone else here is as well. But I just feel like it's disappeared slightly in the past.
You're singing what I'm thinking, because my goal, and I'm making it sort of my goal, and I'm speaking to a few people from the BFC, because I can't believe fashion shows only have photographers front row, right in the front spot, you know, Getty Images and all of that there. Where are the illustrators? Please, I don't, like, I saw Sue Dre at Vauxhall Fashion Scout, and I'm like, but why aren't they at Burberry show? Like, what, you know, these are the fundamental parts of fashion. Why? You know, we did something with Alberta Ferretti, which was a taster of what could happen, and they were like so amazed with what was happening and what was being created. And I was saying, look at all the assets. People are being filmed, drawing, you know, there's all these, a photographer's just doing a snap. You know, you're not photographing the photographer, the illustrator's creating live art. Why aren't they all present? I know it's celebrity driven, but there could be 6 seats. And I'm hoping to get David Downton to have a talk as well, because he spoke to me about, you know, going to the Galliano shows, and he was like, there was like 3 or 4 illustrators there, and it was amazing to be immersed in that moment, capture it, illustrate it. Maybe, like you're saying, because it's being run by graphic designers and not, Galliano is a great illustrator, and he, Karl Lagerfeld, a great illustrator, Yves Saint Laurent, great illustrator. So they had the core ingredients, and they wanted to bring in other people to enrich that. And I think, you know, Christian Dior, he was an illustrator. So I'm hoping that fashion design doesn't become too sort of aesthetic, you know, contemporary, contextual, that it doesn't connect with the illustration arts anymore, and it becomes more like a thinker, you know, this sort of Simmons approach. So I don't know what you're thinking. I can see you on the top of my screen. So Sophie, what's your thoughts?
I'm surprised that fashion illustrators aren't there at shows, because I think the handwriting of an artist kind of gives it its own kind of VIP sort of mood and status. And I think what David Downton's doing at Claridge's is really interesting, in that sense that we know those celebrities, but when we see them drawn by him in Claridge's, it gives it something so much more sophisticated. It kind of amplifies what kind of going to Claridge's is, and making it really special and something that most people can't do. And it's that mood that he creates. And I'm just amazed that fashion houses aren't using illustrators more in the same kind of way, where it's like, you know, there's an artist that has a handwriting that they feel really captures the house, the brand, and kind of selling that as something that is special, that you know, because photography when it's just the looks coming down the catwalk, it's quite generic, you know, it's
Yeah.
a photograph. Whereas as soon as, you know, if Caroline went in and sat there and she was the artist for a brand, and her handwriting was known, you know, that was the lens that we were viewing the experience of the catwalk through. I just think it would just elevate the whole thing so much and make it very like a kind of private members club, that eye. And so I kind of hope that they start jumping on that, because I just think what David's doing at Claridge's is so clever. It's so clever. It's so relevant, and it's so chic, and then you're seeing all these celebrities, which kind of keeps it cultural. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what you think, but sometimes, I mean, photography is great, you know, I absolutely love it, but I think sometimes a drawing just captures the fabric, it captures the movement, the energy of that time that a photograph doesn't do. A photograph to me is a little bit more static. So, you know, I've been trying to teach today the students, when they draw everything to the template like it's sprayed on. I was like, who wears clothes like that? Even if it's a fitted garment, you know, you wear things. Clothing is to be worn, it's not sprayed on, it's got movement, you know, try and get the texture. And I think that's what, you know, as illustrators we can all offer, you know, Sophie, with your textures, and just to move away from what I see as a little bit of flatness sometimes, whether it's analog or CAD. I'm not sure.
Also, like with regards to you, Kelly, because your space of working, if you were requested to draw at a show, do you think you would turn up with an iPad or all your other bits?
I would prefer not to turn up with the iPad, and that's kind of something that I'm wanting to develop a way of using, sort of, be it sort of collage methods, quicker methods, to do it by hand rather than the digital stuff.
And do you think you'd feel quite comfortable backstage, or front of house? Where would you prefer to be?
I'm not sure. Either. But I certainly feel like I need to build my confidence in that area, because, you know, with all of this sort of illustration stuff, like a lot of this I didn't know anything about a few months ago. Like, I had no clue. I didn't know actually the illustrators work backstage. So all of the things you were saying, bringing them back, I didn't even know they were there. So it kind of just illustrates the fact that things have sort of disappeared and do need to come back.
Because I know Francesco was also, he draws what has been lost, and we will find out, and the goal to achieve is that fashion illustrators need to learn the places that they can put themselves. So if it's backstage, what is their role backstage? So if you look at Dazed or ID, they have photographers who specifically shoot backstage, and they capture the essence of backstage, and they're really good at it. So sort of documentary photographers, and then you'll have all the Getty image monsters down at the front taking these Vogue shots of just the catwalk, which is just for sellability factor. Where illustrators have to find themselves in between the gaps of where could we fit in, or be part of, or find our own footprint. And that is what my sort of thought process is going. So building this sort of community, because you can't do anything alone. That's number one.
No.
The second thing is building up a collective, which I think we nearly have, and then saying to people, right, have you got the courage to go to the, like, I got commissioned to do Star Wars, to draw the outfits for Star Wars, but I had to go to Wales because I'd booked a holiday. So I said, I can't go to film Star Wars. Could someone else do it? So I recommended a load of illustrators from the RCA. And then I rang someone. I went on Show Studio, and I found a few illustrators that I thought were quite good. And I contacted one of them, and I hope they're not on here. And he said to me, it doesn't fit in with my Starbucks job. And I said, you never will get an opportunity. It was 6 months work on Star Wars, designing all the outfits for Star Wars. And he was like, but I can't afford to lose. And that proves the fragile spot that illustrators are in. He was like, because I said, your work's amazing. And he goes, but I've got no money. I can't even eat. And I need to work at Starbucks. And I was like, this is embarrassing, you know. So illustration and fashion illustration, or the word illustration, or whatever it is, it has to be reset. The button needs to be repressed and put into the right places where we take ownership. And I think that is sort of my space to go and get all of you people, all the illustrators, artists, to follow the pathway or somewhere to get them to understand. And it is showing them, like with Alberta Ferretti or with Lacoste or whatever project we get, that they go, oh, wow, I didn't even know they could do this. And I was like, of course they can do it. They're artists, they're creatives, but they need to be reawoken. And I think the old times of doing advertisements, illustrators need to forget about that. Yes, you might get one ad or two campaigns, but we know celebrity and photography for celebrity, that is fixed and it won't change because of the power of the celebrity. So we need to find a new space, and that is the objective of all the things. So all the competitions and the words that are used, documentary, classical, whatever it is, fashion show, is hopefully showing you the guideway pathways of where I want everybody to kind of fit in and set a new sort of status of this is where we need to be. And I think now people are doing it, we will see new opportunities come. And I can't tell you everything that I'm doing in the background, but things are, we're speaking to some interesting places, and the US are talking to me. So there will be opportunities. Everything takes time. And if you work with institutions or people, they're so slow. Alberta Ferretti took 11 months to get them to agree, because they're a big brand, it's a big risk. So a lot of these people are frightened to do stuff because they're like, oh, illustrators, what are they going to do? And because usually you have to sign 1,000 forms to just draw or do anything with any big brand. When I worked for Dior, it was like, you cannot talk about anything for 2 years. And I'm like, I'm going to speak about somewhat, can I tell my mum? It's them silly questions. But the letter's like 40 pages of no speaking about Dior. So it's quite frightening when you sign up for these people. And I think Peter Turner, he was saying the same, Pat, I can't do this, I can't do that, can't do this, can't mention that, can't work. And this restriction of working for these designers, it becomes quite frightening and paralyzing. So anyway, I'm just going to check the time, because how are we doing? Oh, we've been an hour. We could do with that flew by. I don't know. Usually we have a few questions in here, but we've got we need more intrigue. Photography doesn't capture the mystery or as much as the illustrations. Yes, I agree. And I think looking at all of your work and all of the progress of everybody's work, there's a real sense of narrative, mystery, mark making, sort of storytelling. But I feel, because you're makers, I feel there's bones in there. And it was great to hear Luke talking about him working on old bits of paper. That made me feel really happy, because I got severely criticized for that. And also what was quite nice to hear from some of you is doing a foundation, because I know foundations have all been canned, more or less. Yeah. They don't do a foundation. So I don't know if anyone's thoughts on foundations, because I think there's a real loss of that.
There is, yeah.
We still have ours at Bournemouth. We've still got ours that we're sort of clinging on to for dear life, because we can see the role that it plays. It's those foundations. I think when you're talking about drawing in general, is just having those foundations of drawing and knowing that they're vital for fashion design, they're vital for textile design, because a lot of them don't feel that it's relevant at all but
No.
you learn that in foundation and breaking down
Yeah.
thought processes. So but yeah, it's a shame.
Also,
Yeah, my foundation was actually 2 years, because you could leave school in the early 90s and do what was called an introductory in art. So you got all your art, you got your art at A level, your art history and your ceramics in that year, and then you did your foundation. So 2 years of drawing.
Amazing.
You just can't beat it. Whereas now it's almost like if you're teaching first years, right, you've got a month to do a foundation, you know, bit of textiles, bit of drawing, and it's madness. Rather than that proper foundation, which is I found it very memorable, and it's where you learn your fundamentals, because when you go to fashion school, you learn how to pattern cut work, 3D ranges. As I've said, you don't really spend that 2 years drawing.
And
That's the thing. There's no drawing anymore.
No,
it's
it's
St.
so
Martin's.
sad.
no drawing.
Yeah.
How's
Yeah.
St. Martin's, Luke? Do they still have a foundation?
They do. My one was awful, but it was an important time to still kind of just figure stuff out and see a little bit or a slice of, okay, I might not want to do a BA in that and spend 30k or be indebted for 60k. It is a really important time, I think. So I'm saddened to hear that they're really disappearing. But on my foundation, even, drawing did not exist, and I did a foundation in fine arts. We did no drawing classes, no life drawing, nothing. We hadn't, and even when I did fashion design, I'd never, not once, had a life drawing class or anything where we're actually drawing anything figuratively. Luckily, I had a really great creative director of my uni, which he's a brilliant illustrator. His name's Rob Phillips. And he was the creative director, and he took it upon himself to create a little group of some of our some students he thought had illustration potential. He put us in a group and he challenged us, and he did like a little competition. But on the actual curriculum, drawing does not exist anymore. It's like, and even when I look at job descriptions nowadays, all of the design jobs in the big companies, it's always CAD. You need to be Creative Suite literate, of course, fluent in Adobe. And then drawing is like a side thing. Oh, it's, you know, it's a nice bonus, nice plus if you can draw. So yeah, that is sad to hear.
It is really
foundation
sad.
course is so vital for just bravery, you know, being and I remember being taught what negative space was at foundation course, and the first time it was presented, I just, you know, I couldn't bend my head around it at all. But we had like the most fantastic, you know, 2 or 3 times a week drawing sessions, and just to be free, you know, those exercises that you did in the beginning, like draw with your left hand, draw with your eyes shut, draw with a piece of charcoal on a really long stick, where you let go of a lot of your fear about, I've got to make perfect drawings, you know, that kind of brave mark making for me. Yeah, I did my foundation course in Bath, and it was fantastic. I mean, the RCA probably topped it just, but I mean, as a year of education, my foundation course is amazing. Yeah.
But I guess maybe our next topic is the end of drawing. Like the end of print, the end of painting. We've got the end of drawing, and I think that would be a really good discussion. I've seen there's the Trinity drawing prize that's coming up, so that's usually quite, I think it used to be called, I don't know, it was at Wimbledon. I remember always going down there and seeing people going mad. But there's a drawing show that happens, and there's a book on drawing. But when you meet, I guess, people that draw a lot, and all of you are competent drawers, is, you know, the fundamental of a person who can draw really has good aesthetics. If you meet someone who's got good taste, they tend to be good at drawing. And you'll notice that there's a sort of mix between the two, because they understand form, they understand volume, they understand shape, they understand color, and it really comes together in them sort of places. So I guess the end of drawing is going to be an interesting conversation. I don't know who I'm going to get in the panel. it may be David Downton, because he'll give me a good grilling. But he'll, I think he's on my radar for our next big chat. So, and it's fascinating to hear what he has to say. And Richard Haynes, we did a talk with Richard Haynes, and he's really, I guess, similar to you, Luke. He went down the fashion route. He lost his job and then had no money, and then just had created a blog and illustrated from there forwards. So he's quite a fascinating character who I think, I love to see the way Richard Haynes has been embraced, and he just does what he wants and he works his own way. So he's a great character to watch. But we've been over an hour, and I plan to usually be 45 minutes, so we've really gone long. But thank you, everybody. It's been fascinating and brilliant, and it's nice that we've all had our little piece to say, and it's great to see you all in the flesh. And congratulations in getting to the finals of the awards. It was great to see. If you were surprised or not surprised, or you thought you could have gone further or whatever, but it's one of them things, and it does come down to a few last choices with some of the parts of the awards, and it's great to see people just putting themselves in the face of it all. So thanks a lot, and keep going. We're always watching, and we're always planning. We've got some for next year. We've got some really cool things coming through. I'm hoping to release some of them soon, but they're going to have a few. You'll laugh at some of the things that are to come. They might make you chuckle, and you'll say, "Oh, right, that makes sense what he's talking about." So thank you, everybody, and have a good night. Have a glass of wine now. You've survived, and we've got through it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you.